probably seen the recent clips going around where it looks like a celebrity is promoting something and they're not. It looks like Kim Kardashian is talking about a product. It sounds like Rihanna is endorsing something. It feels like Taylor Swift is part of a campaign, and none of it is real. No deal, no agreement, no permission, just AI. And the interesting thing about this is that it isn't actually the technology, it's how quickly people have assumed that this is totally fine. Because the thinking tends to be, well, it's not a real clip, it's generated, it's not like we've copied something directly, so it must be okay. And that's where this gets more complicated than people actually expect. Because if you strip all of the technology out of this, what's actually happening here is very simple. Someone is using another person's identity for commercial gain without permission. That's it. End of story. That is the issue. And we've had legal frameworks around that for a very long time. What's changed now is how easy it is to do and how difficult it is to draw clear lines around it. Now take someone like Rihanna. Her brand isn't just her name. It's not just her music. It's her image. It's her tone, her voice, her presence, all of it. Every time she appears in a campaign, that is very, very controlled by her people. There is a contract behind it. There are restrictions on what people can do. There are usage rights, territories that it can be used in, time limits, approval rights. Everything is very deliberate because that association, her being linked to something, is what carries the value. Same with Taylor Swift. Her entire career over the last few years has been built in part around control. Control of her music, control of her image, control of how her work is used commercially. So the idea that something can now be created that looks or sounds like her and used commercially without her having that control, that's where this becomes a real issue. And then you've got someone like Kim Kardashian, where the commercial model is even more obvious. Her business is built on brand partnerships, endorsements, licensing. So if something appears that looks like she's promoting a product, even if it's AI generated, the commercial impact is the very same. People believe it. They associate her with that product, and that has value, and that is value that people should be paying for. Now here's where it gets legally messy, because there's no single clean legal right in the UK that says you cannot use someone's likeness in this particular AI generated way. It doesn't exist yet in that simple form. So instead you're piecing together different areas of law that frankly weren't designed for this. They didn't foresee AI actually happening. So let's start with copyright, because that's where people most go to first. Copyright protects original works. So if you take an actual image of Rihanna and you use it without permission, that's relatively straightforward. But if you generate a new image that kind of looks like her, you're not copying a specific photograph, you're not reproducing a specific work, you're creating something brand new. So copyright doesn't always bite in the same way that people would expect it to in this kind of situation. So then you move into passing off, and this is where a lot of these situations will actually end up, because passing off is more about misrepresentation. It's about whether you are creating the impression that there is an endorsement, a connection, or a relationship that doesn't actually exist. So if an AI generated video makes it look like Taylor Swift is promoting something, that could be a problem under passing off laws, because the audience isn't analysing whether it's AI. They're reacting to what it looks like in front of them. And if it looks like an endorsement, that is where the issue arises. It looks like that celebrity has endorsed that product. But even that isn't always straightforward, because passing off requires you to show that there is goodwill in the brand, that there has been a misrepresentation, and that there is damage. And depending on how the content is framed, that can become a bit of a grey area. Passing off is never an easy claim in any sense. Then there's data protection, which is interesting. That comes into play when personal data is being used, but again, AI complicates this, because you're not always dealing with clear identifiable data in the output. You're dealing with patterns, training data, and generated results from the AI model, so it doesn't always fit neatly as a data protection issue. And this is the problem. The law is trying to deal with something that doesn't fit into the boxes that it already has, because AI is so new, which means that there is a gap. And when there is a gap, that leads to significant uncertainty. And where there is uncertainty, people push boundaries. Now, this is where it becomes relevant for businesses, because it's very easy to look at this and think, this is a celebrity issue. This doesn't impact my business. It's high profile. It doesn't apply to me. It doesn't apply to us. But the behavior underneath it is actually exactly the same. Using AI to generate content, using images that resemble real people, creating marketing that suggests association or credibility without really stopping to ask, do we actually have the right to use this? And the risk isn't always obvious at the point of creation of the thing, because everything feels fast, it feels efficient, and it feels low risk. You generate something using AI, you use that thing you've generated, nothing happens, so it must be fine, right? Until it isn't, because these things don't tend to get challenged when they're small. They tend to get challenged when they become visible and they start to grow, when they gain traction in the industry, when they start to matter commercially. And at that point, the question is no longer, was this easy to create? Not at all. The question then becomes, what gave you the right to use that in the first place? And this is where most businesses just don't have a good answer, because we generated it from AI doesn't deal with the underlying issue, which is whether the output creates a commercial association that you were not legally entitled to create. There's also another layer to this, which is how these AI tools are trained, because a lot of the current disputes are not just about what comes out of the AI, they're also about what went into it in the first place. Was the training data licensed? Was it scraped? Was permission given? Were you legally allowed to upload that into the model? And if not, what does that mean for its outputs that it creates? And again, we don't have a completely settled answer here yet, because we just haven't come across it before, which means you've got risks at both ends. You've got input into the AI risk and you've got output risk. So where does that leave businesses? Well, it means you have to think about this slightly differently. Not in terms of, is this AI generated content, but in terms of, what does this look like to the outside world if I create this and use it? Does it look like I'm saying I have an endorsement? Does it suggest a connection with this famous brand or person? Does it borrow from someone else's identity? Because that is what will be assessed at the end of the day. Not the technical process, not the process you went through, but the commercial effect. It also means being careful about who you're working with. Agencies, freelancers, content creators. If they are using AI tools, what assurances are they giving you? Are they confirming that the content they produce doesn't infringe rights? Or are you just assuming that the risk sits with them? Because if something goes wrong, those questions will come up very, very quickly. This is where your contracts become very, very important. And this is where this stops being a new tech issue and becomes a very familiar commercial one. It's about rights, it's about ownership, it's about permission, and it's about liability. The same principles have always applied, and they're now being tested in a different way, at a different scale, and much faster than ever before. And that's why this really, really matters now. Because the gap between what is possible and what is actually allowed under the law is getting wider. And most businesses are operating somewhere in that gap without really even realising it, until something pushes back. And that's usually the point where it becomes very real.